Welcome everyone to the Quad Damage Podcast. I'm Deadforge. Joining me as usual is Robert and Midnight Medium. And joining us today is our esteemed guest, Alex Hutchinson, an industry veteran and one of the founders of Typhoon Studios and Raccoon Logic. And we welcome you to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Welcome, Alex.
It's fun.
Welcome.
I haven't done a podcast in a while.
Of course.
Oh, we're thankful that you've chosen to do this one then.
And so without further ado,
Okay.
Yeah. You know what time it is?
Yep.
Let's get booming.
Booming.
Tell Tweed to back off.
Me and you spoke before in obviously an interview on my channel. It's been a while. Sadly, the world didn't get to see that interview, which I still hate to this day and beat myself up about all the time. But
he's
aside from
mentioned
that,
it a few times, yeah.
Just so everyone knows, just kind of, just a few. I miss it all the time. It's one of my biggest fuck ups ever. So, anyway, so everybody can get to know you. Like, just dive into your background a bit, into getting into the games industry and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I started out. Well, I always wanted to be in games, but I grew up on sort of Super Nintendo, Amiga 500 era. So in Australia, it didn't feel like there was a lot of opportunities. So when I was younger, I was reading a bunch of various games magazines, primarily like The One or Amiga Power being my favorite at the time. So I was sort of sending articles in the old days before the internet by snail mail. So I'd write something up and send it over, post it over, and hope that they'd run it. And sometimes they would. It never paid me, but sometimes they'd run it, which is better than nothing, I guess. And so I was just sort of noodling around the edges of the business, and then luckily, after a bunch of rejections at different companies in Melbourne, Australia, I got a job in the very late 90s at a company called Taurus Games in Australia. And they primarily made, Game Boy games for Game Boy Advance. So I was a lead designer because basically they didn't have any design even at that point, or not much. So I got thrown in the deep end. But I was a lead designer on a lot of Game Boy games like Pitfall Main Adventure. I was the level designer on that, and I did some design for Duke Nukem Advance, and then I was a primary designer on Minority Report for Game Boy. Everyone was lusting after that, and I did a bunch of those. And it was a great way to learn the business because I probably did 4 or 5 games in a year because we had really tight deadlines, like 2-3 months. So from pitching to designing to finishing. So we had an in-house 2D engine to do those. But it was a really good way to learn the entire arc of games. You weren't ever going to make anything that was, groundbreaking or astonishing, but it's a good way to learn the craft, of game design. At the end of that, I sort of pitched, weirdly, a PS2 title to a company that no longer exists called BAM Entertainment. And it was going to be based on an old Colin Farrell star vehicle called The Recruit. And then that came out and didn't seem like it was going to be, worth licensing. So we changed the name to Ice 9. And then right at the end, when BAM was running out of money and they weren't paying us, I was like, I got to get out of Australia. And luckily, the producer on that project had gone to EA. And so he hooked me up with interviews at EALA and Maxis. And I ended up getting a gig at Maxis where I was the lead designer on a lot of the console Sims projects, like Herb Sims in the City, which was pretty terrible. But then the Sims 2, which was pretty good. And then Spore, I went over to join Will Wright on Spore. So I did that for a bunch of years. Then came up north to work with that producer who helped me get out of Australia again as a creative director on Army of Two, The 40th Day. And then went to Ubi for 7 years?
Yeah.
About that. Anyway, and I was creative director on Far Cry 4 and Assassin's Creed 3. And then it really hit that point of being sort of sick of big companies and the sort of politics of them. Right. So we decided to start Typhoon. So again, the guy that helped me get out of Australia, and then I worked with again, we got back together, Reed Schneider, and we started Typhoon Studios together. And then we got bought by Google right before the pandemic. That was quite an experience. So we spent about a year trying to convince Google to be creative and failed miserably, absolutely miserably. And then got booted out of that. And the only good bit of that was we were all of us unemployed at the same time. So basically we decided to reform. So we've kind of had the company 8 years, with one of those years or 7 years, with one of those years being inside of Google. And, we shipped Journey to Savage Planet just before we went to Google. Then we shipped Employee of the Month edition as part of Google. So if there's ever a book written, one of the footnotes will be, what is the only video game published and paid for by Google ever in the history of time internally? And it'll be Journey to the Savage Planet, Employee of the Month edition. And then after that, refounded as Raccoon Logic. And now we ship next week Revenge of the Savage Planet, which we're pretty excited about.
Well, looking forward to that. Yeah. Oh, looking forward to that.
So it's quite a trajectory, right? Going from Spore to Army to the sequel, not the first one.
Yeah.
So like. So you mentioned, so Ubisoft. I know they become kind of a meme these days, but surely they put out plenty of good stuff in the past. What was one of your favorite projects to work on when you were there?
The two big ones we had. There was a third sort of new IP that didn't go off the ground. You probably saw it if you ever played Watch Dogs, and if you remember, if you snuck around San Francisco and you broke into the Ubisoft offices in San Francisco, on the computers there you could play a trailer or an unnamed trailer for a space game, and that was a new IP we were developing called Pioneer, which was going to be pretty cool. It was kind of like Among Us in space crossed with Before Among Us, crossed with sort of, that sort of epic golden age of sci-fi art style, but we never got to do that. But I kind of enjoyed all of them. Like Far Cry 4 was a great experience, just really honing that, the formula of that franchise, and I think it's the tightest game I did there. But AC3 was a lot of fun too, because for me it was always felt like, I'd heard this story once years ago that the Formula One was kind of busted because the slowest driver in the fastest car would always win, and the fastest driver in the slowest car would always lose. And it felt like sometimes I was driving a Ford Pinto, and I was like, I would like to try and drive the Ferrari every now and again. So we went to Ubisoft, and they go, it's sort of like money's no object on their big franchises, and you get some time. And at that time, which was sort of, I guess, 2009, 2010, they were still in a really good spot, and they were very creative, and there were a lot of senior people there, and the management was very tolerant, which also become the sort of noose around their neck, I think, lately. But they've lost a lot of the good bits. But they were very welcoming, and we got to try some really crazy stuff. And we put the assassin on a boat, and everyone said, he isn't a pirate, but turns out he could be. It was a lot of fun. Most of those years at Ubisoft were pretty great.
Yeah. What's your favorite Far Cry game?
4. No. Obviously, I don't know. I think 3 is probably the one that refined the sort of modern formula most. There's a lot of cool ideas in 2, but it's a bit rough around the edges. So probably 3 if I had to pick one that wasn't.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to admit that the only Far Cry game that I've played is Blood Dragon, which I thought was exceptionally good.
Hey, that one's good though. That's a good. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Far Cry Primal. Actually, there's just something unique about it, and it's more old caveman aesthetic kind of thing going on.
Well, I think they forgot that sometimes people think innovation is completely redoing everything, and I think that's just a way to lose a lot of money and spend a lot of time. There's no need to redo how a pistol works. Unless your game is about pistols, for example. So I think in the old days there was some smart reuse of pointless stuff, and then innovating on the cool parts, like Blood Dragon. There's nothing new in that game, basically. You know what I mean? It's just the tone and the setting that's new, and a few odd enemies. But but you can combine that to make something really, really awesome.
Yeah. I'm glad to see that Ubisoft.
Blood Dragon was a great experience.
Yeah, we seem to be having a lot of lag, so apologies if we're talking over each other. It's
mild lag.
Yeah. What was I going to say? It was about Assassin's Creed. I'm glad to see that Assassin's Creed is kind of almost coming full circle towards the earlier games, and that they're not becoming those kind of big bloated, open world experiences, because those really kind of put me off it. I believe it may be Medium that would disagree with me, but the games set in like Egypt and stuff, I think that they're it takes far too much long to do that. It's about the contained experience and the quality of it rather than the size of it. I mean, what's your philosophy on kind of game design in that way? Do you think bigger is better?
Well, I don't at all. In fact, these days, and I probably tackle that from a few different angles, but on the Assassin's Creed side, they were action adventure story games to me. And so then it was this desire, I think, amongst management to sort of squeeze more playtime out. Like the industry has these cycles of, perceived wisdom that are shared amongst the C-suite and the executive floor. And the one that was going around there was, you've got to keep the disc in the tray, because basically they looked at the data, this is going back in time, but the GameStop, the resale market, which we got no money from, was basically primed to work within 2 weeks. So you wanted to keep the disc in the tray for 2 weeks. If you could do that, you could cut off 80% of resale, basically. And that stopped you losing a bunch of cash. And so they wanted to push games bigger and bigger. And then that led to a lot of bloat, where because you needed more people because you couldn't get more time, which meant that the talent was sort of diluted in the studios, and then just everything got harder, I think was a challenge. And so it was kind of the philosophy for founding Typhoon and then Raccoon, which was to try and do a segment of a AAA game instead of trying to do all of it, you know what I mean? Which would need 600 people to try and do, just the single player portion and just sort of 20 hours. Which, if I said that, 20 years ago, people were like, that's a AAA game. Like, what are you talking about? And there's all this bloat that grew up, in the sort of the buffet lunch of video games, that your game needed to be a platform. That was another hot button issue. I have, everything, co-op mode and multiplayer mode.
Fortnite and Roblox.
Yeah, exactly. And you're just like, I guess that's code for popular now. You know what I mean? Like, it's a platform. Like, no, people just like it. So that's what. So I think, for me, especially now with kids, I'd rather play like 5 weird games than one monster polished, mediocre game. So yeah, I like them shorter. But you won't convince an EA of that one.
Of course, yeah. All they're going to see is, are these people playing for longer? How much do you spend in a movie theater for 2 minutes? If my game is 20 hours, we should be getting that kind of money out of people. So I do appreciate, your point of view in regards to that.
Well, we learn it's another, like, the sort of Metroidvania, which is just sort of a code shorthand for lock and key design. Like you have a small space, there's a lock, you need to find a key, you get access to a bigger space, there's a new lock, and you explore. It's a nice way. I like it to tutorialize stuff. It's sort of a natural shape, and I like it. I'm a bit of a collect 'em up fanatic. I grew up on the Rare games on the Nintendo 64 as well, and sort of all those games where or whether it's Skyrim or the Rare games, the desire to go to every corner of the map and find, every little secret was something I liked. And then, it just seemed we had a lot of AAA devs, so we weren't afraid of doing something in 3D. We weren't afraid of doing something, with sort of complex networking. So, because we had guys with experience, so Metroid Prime seemed like an untouched template in that subgenre.
Are there any other games, perhaps, that inspired it that people might not immediately think about?
I mean, it's sort of halfway between Far Cry 4. It's got a chunk of Far Cry 4 in it, in sort of it's a player story. We used to call it the Anecdote Factory on Far Cry. Like, you want the game to generate player stories. So we tried to bring a little bit of that. There's a lot more in Revenge of the Savage Planet. There's a lot more systemic base to it, along with the potty here. So hopefully, that resonates. But no, it was more like inspired by old movies and old Golden Age science fiction stuff. Like the idea that you could explore, the world because it's awesome, and there's other planets and they're teeming with life, before we found out there's nothing there but rocks, and we'd be stuck up there like Matt Damon eating poop mushrooms in The Martian. So, like, I think it's harkening back to a more positive era.
Now it's time for our burning questions round, where our guest has 5 minutes to answer 5 randomly generated questions from the internet, including the trick question that we added in there. Sorry, I didn't tell you there was a trick question before, but there is one there. So you can be as wide or as short as with the answers as you want, buddy. So going to question 1. What type of things do you doodle?
I doodle like really weirdly crappy mechanical contraptions. So arrows and springs and coils and mechanics, just sort of random stuff while I'm in a meeting. So I'm a terrible doodler, so I probably look like I'm not listening at all. But yes, rubbish.
Sweet. Okay, cool. And then moving on to question 2 then. It's, if you could change the length of each day to make it perfect for you, how many hours would it be?
Well, I like to sleep and I like to stay up late. I reckon I'd go for 30. I reckon I go for 30 hours because otherwise what happens right now is I end up, you put the kids to bed, then the wife go to bed, then I'll start playing games, and then it's 2 a.m. And then then I'd rather sleep properly from there. So I'm cutting down on sleep time, but I probably just play longer. So yeah, let's go 30, arbitrarily 30.
Yeah. I'm fully in agreement. I'm an habitual afternoon napper, which means I end up going to bed at 2 a.m. literally every morning. So like this here, I'm just there smoking at like 1:30 a.m. every night. That is literally my routine. So 30 hours sounds like a good answer. Yeah. But question 3. What memory have you been thinking about a lot lately? This one's a bit deep.
Well, that's a deep one. Well, I've been thinking I don't go back to Australia as much. I live in Montreal now in Canada, so I don't get back home as much as I would like. So I've been thinking about the family going back this year. So I've been thinking about, my dad was a sports journalist, and he wrote a lot of sort of articles about football and books about sport and travel and all that sort of stuff. So I've been thinking a lot about his career, now that he's sort of basically retired, and asking him a few questions when I get back there, just in case time is short.
Yeah, family are obviously extremely important. I live away from them myself. My mother's constantly trying to get me to move back, especially as the years go by. So it's one of those things where I think the older you get, the more you feel the drive for family.
Especially if you have kids.
Question 4. Yeah, I wish I could agree with you, but I don't have kids, so I think you're a bigger man than me when it comes to...
No.
Deadforge has kids, so no doubt he's in agreement with you. Question 4. What's the best comeback you've ever heard?
Best comeback? You're the only one who's going to get this. It was a cricket comeback between a leg spinner called Shane Warne, and I can't remember the English batsman who was batting at the time. And pardon my French in this. He said, "Shane, why are you so fucking fat?" And Shane Warne said, "Because every time I fuck your mother, she gives me a cookie."
Holy shit.
So I'll give you another one. Another cricket one, because cricket is the king of sledging. It was Ian Botham. Ian Botham said this. He said it was Glenn McGrath bowling to him, Australian bowler to a British batsman, and Glenn McGrath said, "How's your wife and my kids?" And Ian Botham said, the wife's amazing. The wife's amazing, but the kids are fucking retarded. That's terrible.
Oh,
anyway,
God.
you probably want to run those ones. Two greatest comebacks I've ever heard. And they were not live. I think they were out of the broadcast, but as reported later.
Yeah, I had no idea that cricket was so dramatic, funny.
Yeah, the worst thing they ever did was they put a microphone in the stump so you could hear what they were saying, and they had to clean up their act. But until then, it's like baseball. Baseball's the American version. The amount of shit talk going on in baseball is shocking. It looks like, the old joke is that, rugby is a thugs game played by gentlemen, and cricket is a gentleman's game played by thugs. And I think that's always held.
Excellent. So, question 5, and I actually don't know if this is going to be one that you'll answer, so I'm curious as to see if you'll even want to answer it. If you ran Stadia, what would you have done differently?
I would have finished it. I think I would have thought very carefully about whether I wanted to move from a business, which is about making apps, like, like a service sort of apps thing, to a creative business, because creative businesses require a strong stomach and a lot of people skills. And it didn't feel like that was something that was a fit for Google. They would say things like, "We wish you would make a game that would appeal to everybody all the time." And you would say, "It's not possible. There's nothing," and it just was very difficult. And they would say things like, "People love Google Maps." And you're like, "Nobody loves Google Maps. People like that it gets them from point A to point B, but no one loves a map. It's not possible." I don't reminisce about the time I opened the map to go to my mum's house and it was right. You know what I mean? Like, it's just nonsense. So I think they need to think a little bit more carefully about where they spend time, because otherwise it's frustrating to people who might want to have actually done that.
Yes, yeah. Of course, there are real world consequences.
They also chose to really jump into a very new niche of like streaming games exclusively, which was a choice alone, but then also like never really having any kind of dog in any kind of gaming prior to that, it was just like an interesting thing for them to jump into, and then they just really didn't stick with it. But hey, at least Journey to the Savage Planet was in the Tom and Jerry movie, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. We got that on our own, though. That wasn't them. That was through Warner Brothers. So, like, no, they did nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very strange. It was very, and you could tell in that we would be in these weird Google town halls, and you're like, we're this gaming division, and the questions from who knows what, some old lady would be like, why are we making games? And we were like, it's a good question, guys. We don't know why you want to be making games, but you made us an offer we couldn't refuse. That's why we're here.
I was so excited when Google and Amazon actually with their Luna service. I have good internet, so streaming games is not an issue for me. I beat Doom Eternal on Stadia flawlessly. It was brilliant. So when they both launched their ecosystems, I was excited for it because, after PlayStation and Xbox and PC, it was a new player had entered the arena. It wasn't just a service, it was a whole platform. So you could see just every decision that they had made was wrong at each step of the way, and that they didn't listen to people in terms of, what it was that people actually wanted in a Stadia service. I personally think they should have just integrated it into YouTube, just the way they've done with music and stuff. And then you've got direct access on the biggest ecosystem on the planet was sat there waiting, and they tried launching their own one. So when they bought you, and then the whole service closed down, and I got that email, immediately you think to yourself, what is going to happen to the executives? How are they going to be held accountable for this? Because now this studio, Typhoon, these people are out of a job, and they've got to go out and find something else. So I'm very happy that you managed to retain the rights to your game so that you were able to go ahead and make a sequel. How did that meeting with them go in terms of retaining the rights to it?
Well, I mean, they did, and they kept them. So, like, we had to buy them back from them. So basically, they sold. We had to find the money to buy it back afterwards.
Right.
So it was not. It wasn't for free. And what we learned was, that Google is good at buying things and not good at selling things. So it took longer to buy the rights back than it did to sell them the company.
Wow.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about Stadia. I came like this close to getting one. And then by the time I was about to make that jump is when they were like going under and the whole thing happened. And I mean, I was a huge Journey to Savage Planet fan, so I was like, no, Typhoon, really? No. And I was just like, I was looking at, all your socials and everybody and everything like that. And I can't remember, it was sometime around when you guys, I guess, started Raccoon Logic before you did the Employee of the Month edition. I was like, yes, they're back.
Yeah, we're gonna survive.
I was like, we get more Savage Planet. It was awesome.
Yeah, well, and next week, so even better.
Yeah. I go on vacation next weekend, but I'll be playing it Thursday and Friday for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a Deadforge video coming out on it, no doubt, sometime soon.
Awesome.
So, Alex, there's if you were kind of ingrained into the original game, as I've been for the past couple of weeks, kind of getting reacclimated to it, playing it for the second time, you'd notice, of course, that it's in first person the whole way through. I'm noticing from the footage of Revenge that it's all in third. Is there a option between those two, or is that kind of a full-on, totally different emphasis this time around?
Yeah, I think that's one of the rare-ish moments where being at a huge studio would have been useful, where, we just didn't have the bandwidth. We're still only 30 people, so like some outsourcing, so it's a very small team. So we just didn't have the bandwidth to do a first-person mode. I'd love to. We can't promise anything. We're looking at maybe smashing something in later, but no.
Well, I guess to bounce off of that, what has been some of the, biggest challenges in developing Revenge of the Savage Planet over Journey, given that it still has co-op like the original, but now it has actual local split screen, which I just want to say thank you for adding that. I'm going to be playing it with my son 100%.
Yeah, that's it.
So,
well, that's it.
Yeah, and so and given all those additions and the third person and all that, like, what are some unique challenges, I guess, that this one is? You've had to tackle. It's got what, like customization features and stuff like that too. So,
Yeah, it's got like it's a bigger, better, more version in some ways. 5 planets instead of one, and a lot more tools, and something like 70 something creatures, where they're only like 20 something on the first one. So there's a lot of that. But then, yeah, split screen was a big deal. We did it on Armia 2 back in the day, and that worked really well. It was in Far Cry. We didn't split screen, but 2-player co-op in Far Cry. So we love co-op, especially for that. What you said, Deadforge, was like you and your kid or your partner.
Yeah, 100%.
And especially now, like I feel like there's. Yeah, we're sort of trying to bring back what we saw as the golden age of gaming, which was, us and our best friend on the couch with a pizza on a Saturday, playing, Contra or, anything like this, the old Simpsons game or X-Men, all that sort of stuff. So if we can get a bit of that vibe back, I think that'd be really great.
For sure. Yeah, I miss games having split screen stuff. I think that's why like stuff like It Takes Two and Split Fiction and all that is just done tremendously well, because you have to play them that way. And then they give you a free copy to play online with somebody if somebody hops in to play online. So, yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Did Army
of
Two have split screen?
It did. Yeah, it still looks good for having split screen. But we had a funny story. Reed and I went to Korea many years ago to talk about various things they were doing in cyber cafes at the time, and we were out having a drink, and we got approached by these American army guys in full fatigues, and they were like, "What do you do for a living?" And we're like, "Oh, this doesn't sound great." And so like, we make video games, and they were like, "Which ones?" And we're like, "Army of Two," and they were like, "We love that game." So we learned very much there that like on army bases and in dorms and in and when you have kids and all that sort of stuff, you realize no one has 2 TVs, or very rarely do you have 2 TVs and 2 consoles or 2 PCs to network. It's really split screen. If you want to play with someone on those contexts, and that's a huge chunk of the audience if you think about it. If we had colleges, army bases, and and families, then you're really missing out. But it's a lot of work to finish the answer to that question. It's a huge amount of work to get it going, and you need to sort of plan it from day one, because you're changing your interface, you're changing how it's ran. It's 2 renders as opposed to 1. Like all kinds of different things you need to worry about. So that was probably also the most work.
Yeah, I had no idea that there was so much. You look at it and you think it's just a screen split in half and someone's been moved to the center of it. But I guess that's the beauty of what you do. It's designed to look seamless to the end user.
Yeah, like if you think about all the old school couch co-op games, they were sort of just 2 characters on one screen, so you didn't have to deal with as much. But now you have camera control and all that sort of stuff, so you sort of have 2 scenes you're rendering at any time, and then all the innovation, you need 2 sets of interface that move, that go with it. So yeah, there's a chunk of work.
Would you say that the challenges are more technical than they are? Like, I know some cynical people would be like, "Well, we got rid of local co-op to make people buy an extra copy of the game." Is it primarily probably technical versus just financial?
Oh yeah, it's just the assumption was that everyone was playing on the net online, but everyone's online now, so everyone's playing with someone not in their own house or not in their physical location. So I think that was the assumption, and then it's easy to justify when it also takes work out of the schedule. So I think people did that, but because no, but I don't think it's. I think even like say Split Fiction, if you want to play with someone else, they get a free copy. I'm pretty sure.
With A Journey to the Savage Planet, which is obviously coming out very soon, are you waiting to see how the audience is receptive to it before you move forward with any other ideas, or do you have something formulated? Obviously not asking you to go into details, but the nebulousness of an idea for a third game if the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, we have a pretty good idea of what we do for a third game if it comes to that. And we have an idea we've always fantasized about being a bit like Bethesda, where they managed to build up bigger and bigger games with a relatively small team, sort of 80 people, by building on top of what they'd already done, and then spinning off their engine into science fiction to make Fallout. You know what I mean? It saves you years of work, and you can do more with less people. And so we've got another idea for a new IP based on a lot of the same tech, and then we have a multiplayer idea we're toying around. But the market is so weird at the moment that we're pitching to everybody. Yeah, we're pitching to all kinds of people, and maybe if this one does well enough, hopefully we can self-fund the next one. That's another option. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's the market has become so divisive now. It's either an indie or it's a AAA. So seeing games that fill that particular niche in the mid, or in America they say niche, in the middle of it. It's almost like a dying breed now, and there needs to be more games within that particular segment of the gaming, because not everyone wants to play a $700 million Call of Duty game or a 40-hour Assassin's Creed game or something. Some people, they want a nice linear 8-hour experience or something, and games like, you know, Savage Planet, or you could call it's a franchise now. It's not even a game, it's a franchise.
Yeah, that's it. It's a platform.
Yeah. Shared universe incoming.
A shared universe. Well, Dave, we announced it, but you can play as Dave the Diver. You can play as Dave the Spaceman.
Really?
In our game. So yeah, we kind of deal with them, which
Nice.
is pretty funny. So that's pretty cute.
Yeah.
So you have,
Nice.
instead
That's
of
cool.
a helmet, you have a kind of rubbery Dave head. So it's a bit strange.
That's cool.
But yeah, I think it's just a tricky spot. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because the AA is sort of in that $10 to $20 million cost range, and that's a lot of money for a lot of people, but not enough money for the big guns. So you're sort of in the dead zone of spending, where, you know, so an EA will say, well, if you quadruple our investment, we're not going to make much money. So why don't we just put all of that into something else? And a Devolver will say, we don't have that amount of money. So like you sort of, we cobble it together almost like movies, where, you know, if you ever watched a movie and you see 10 production companies at the start, the reason is they've got $1 million from each of them. You know what I mean? And like sort of stitch together the funding model for the game.
Yeah,
and so that's often how we feel we end up doing that and just running out of money and finding.
Yeah, I know a lot of games get.
A bit more.
Yeah, a lot of games. I know a lot of companies get loans from states and countries and stuff like that. They give off these loans.
There's a lot of tax breaks.
Certain things. Yeah.
They generally structure it these days as generally structured as a tax break. Yeah. So like you can get a refund from the taxes. So it's not quite a loan. It's good for the state because it means you're paying someone in the state, right? And so then they're assuming you've created employment, and then instead of taking, you know, half that money, they take a quarter of that money. So I think it works out for them, and then all that money goes back into the economy anyway because everyone has to go buy lunch, you know. So it's a good deal if you can do it.
Right. So I'm gonna hop into a couple of these viewers' questions while we're at it.
Okay. Yeah.
So the first one. And this is, I think both of these, well, I guess the first one's mostly for Journey, I believe. But I guess it works for Revenge as well. From the Savage Planet fan via X. What was the thought process for designing half the alien creatures or characters in the game? They all look so stupid. It's great.
It's very hard. It's very hard to be authentically stupid. That's the problem. It takes a lot of smarts to be really stupid. It's like a pratfall, you know. It takes time. But no, so I mean, what we tried, I brought the monstrous manual from the original Dungeons and Dragons into the office on the first game, and it was basically like, when I got it, it was amazing. Like, you see a beholder, it's an eyeball covered in eyeballs, and you're like, what the fuck is this? I don't know what it is. Is it a friend? Is it a foe? Is it hard? Is it small? Is it big? And so we wanted to get back to that a little bit and try and have creatures that didn't look like established tropes or cliches. So that's the first part. And then the second part was then to sort of make sure there's a breadth of gameplay for them as well, that they're not predictable, and you don't quite know what's going to attack you and what's going to be your friend.
Right. You know, one of my favorites is in Hot Garbage, the Fruit Loop toucan puffbirds. Loved that. As soon as the first time I killed one, it's just like milk and Fruit Loops just bust out of them. I was like, that's great. That's just great.
Toucan Sam.
Love it.
That's him. No, and if you go in the wardrobe in this and you collect all the gear, we have sort of a Temu version of the red shirts from Star Trek, and there's a Temu Han Solo and a Temu. There's all kinds of
That's great.
versions
That's great.
of costumes, so you can live out your
I saw a couple
fantasy as much as you want.
Yeah, I saw a couple in the trailers for Revenge. I also love that you got like the base customization stuff going on, where you can like move stuff around and everything. It just overall it does look like the kind of bigger and better thing. And as someone who 100%ed the base game and the DLC, I'm sure I'm going to be lost in it for quite some time.
I hope so.
No doubt about
and
that.
Hopefully a few more people as well.
Yeah. Oh, I hope so. You know what? I can guarantee it. How about that? I'll give you that. So, from Registrum via X, how often was the office filled with laughter from all the silly jokes and gags? And I have a feeling it was quite often.
It comes and goes. I often see like making a video game is, it's very exciting at the start, and then it's hopefully exciting at the end when you finish. And in between, it's like the valley of despair. And where you make a rough cut of something and it's not very good, and you have to do it again. And video games are a lot about iteration on making them. So you make it once, you make it twice, then you realize what you fucked up in that version, and you make it a third time. And whether it's especially in things like level design and and bits like that. So it's very tiring in the middle to keep the faith and go through it, but it's very funny at the end when everything's going well. But yeah, sometimes in the middle it's pretty hard.
Of course.
But generally it's the humor also comes last on the game a lot of the time. Like, it's late. It comes in late in the game because it requires polish and requires, if you think about humor as timing or surprise or these sorts of things, it requires a lot of iteration to get right.
Alrighty. Under the Mayo, whom you may know from his YouTubing days, he asks the hard-hitting question: do you prefer drinking Coke or Pepsi when eating pizza?
Well, I have a good answer to this, believe it or not, because there is only one place in North America where Pepsi has always outsold Coca-Cola, and it is Montreal, Quebec, Canada. That is the only place in all of North America, and it has always outsold Coca-Cola. So the answer is Pepsi, but in reality, I still drink Diet Coke. But the answer for the province is Pepsi, and it's because they did a smart thing, and then apparently didn't think they should do it everywhere else, which is they had a local legend hockey player advertising it and a local comedian. So there was a lot of local stuff, which is part of the reason I talk about it was that we did a lot of localization in the first game, and everyone traditionally does French localization for Parisian French. And because obviously we're a bilingual province and it's part of the deal and something we should do to make sure it's in French as well, we did really Quebecois French, like hardcore slang. Imagine if you did an American version, but it's all deep South slang, and and that's what it's pretty funny, and it went down really well. And so we just did because also our second highest player base was in China for the first game, which was really cool in that it makes us think the comedy wasn't just in the script; it was in the gamepad.
Yeah.
But we did a full localization this time around in China. So I was out there for like 4 days in Shenzhen and Shanghai the other week. And it's in like 500 malls in China with 500 billboards, like in couch co-op setups in there. So it was kind of crazy. It was kind of cool. So hopefully that repeats itself.
That has to be amazing to see, just your game out there in so many public places. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it was surprising actually. Like, we cut that deal, and because it was a guy who runs a company there, and he'd grown up. He was born in China, and he'd done his university in Washington, and so he'd had consoles his whole life. And when he went back to China, he realized that they didn't know what consoles were. They'd never had that whole passed them by. So his vision was couch co-op. So in all these malls, he has these open locations where you can dump your kids, or sit down for a while, and and try some of those Western games.
Yeah.
There's actually a local shop around where I live at one point that actually allowed you to go inside and just kind of rent. I think they just allowed you to like rent time to sit. It was like super cheap, but they just let you sit down and just like play games. They had the X rocker chairs set up and like a bunch of TVs, and
I got one of those.
Just play co-op and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then they were just a regular game shop on top of that. Yeah, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's exactly. So again, you got to meet the players where they are, and so hopefully it inspires a few people to buy it on Steam or something down there as well.
Yeah, certainly.
All right, a hard-hitting follow-up. Then I have one little short question for you since we mentioned Quebecois. This is from Scott Miller of Apogee fame. And he asks, the follow-up question for the ages: jalapenos or no jalapenos on your pizza pie?
I'm more of a pineapple on the pizza guy. Really, if I'm going to go that way, I'm a fan of the Hawaiian, and I don't care who knows it.
Well, pineapple and jalapenos actually go together so well as really on a pizza. They really do go to. Scott's answer was the answer is always jalapenos, which
I was going to say he did say that if you said no jalapenos that you were wrong. So.
Yeah, well, that's they got a lot of strong opinions out that way.
What's kind of in the immediate future for Raccoon, and what's in the long-term future for you?
So it's launch week. So tomorrow all the reviews start coming out. So I think it'll be beer and a shot over lunch for the team. Maybe we'll get some pizzas, maybe some Hawaiians.
Hell
Yeah,
Add some
pineapple on
jalapenos.
it.
So that's the
There you go. Add some jalapenos.
the very short. Yeah. And there's not many of us, so we're in that. It's pretty difficult as a small team because you sort of have to be pitching and starting again as immediately as you finish. There's sort of no time for a break, but we want to try and have a quieter summer for the team. You know what I mean? Where they're not busting their asses so much. But for me, it's I got meetings with everyone from Sony to Nintendo to talk about stuff and see if there's what they want and if it aligns with what we want. And the beauty of being a small team is we can sort of pick a little bit, and we have enough in the bank to not go out of business next week, which is a bonus. So hopefully it's sort of like figuring out what we're going to do next, having a light, a quieter summer, and then really getting into the project towards the fall.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whatever's new in the fall.
And the game's also dropping on Game Pass, right? Isn't it dropping on Game Pass?
Game is dropping on Game Pass. If you love it, please add the $10 to do the Cosmic Hoarder edition. Because that was what keeps us in business. That's the T-shirt at the rock concert, if you know what I mean. Like, it's where you actually have to make buy a poster. But
I pre-ordered the game from GameStop, which I'll be picking up after work on Thursday, and I will be giving you another $10 for the Cosmic Hoarder edition as soon as I get it installed.
You are
all that.
Yeah,
100%.
You are a friend of
Raccoon. You guys deserve it.
Thank you, sir.
What is it like doing business with Google versus with Microsoft?
They're all the big companies are pretty faceless. That's the thing. It's hard to get. They're pretty fractured and pretty faceless. Like there's lots of departments that compete with each other, and sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. But Microsoft's been a great friend for us on this one. They've always treated us well, and they were great friends of the first game. So I have nothing but good things to say about Microsoft. They've been just been great.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, if it wasn't for Journey to the Savage Planet being on Game Pass that first go-around, I'm not even sure if I would have ended up playing it and falling in love with it. Gotta be honest, because
that's it.
It was recommended to me by my brother, and he was like, "Hey, I think you'll really like this." And then I'm like, "Okay." And because I remember hearing about it and seeing it, and I wasn't sure what it was, and then I played it, and I was like, "Yep, this is me." Then I went and bought a physical copy.
Yeah.
So hopefully we don't know quite the numbers, but Microsoft told us it did quite well in Game Pass, so we're hoping that translates to sales on the second. So
nice.
I will say this too, as far as like Game Pass is one thing, and it's great because I'm a huge Game Pass fanboy. But like your marketing trailers are sensational, both for this and the first game. Because I remember the first game's trailer. I think I got it like the exact same day when I got home. And I think I could say that about like one other game. I think I saw a Red Dead Redemption review and went home and bought it. And I think Journey to the Savage Planet was like the second game I did that with, where I was like, that looks pretty good.
That's cool, because we do all those ourselves. Like I would never be allowed to say some of the things we say in those trailers if we were still at the Ubisoft or an EA. We know that the biggest problem is getting through the noise, and so we're trying as much as possible to get people to see it, because as you said earlier, there's just too many games being released, which sounds like a great problem to have, and it is in some ways, but it's not. It's hard for visibility.
Yeah. What's your opinion on the discourse? I don't know if I could call it a discourse then, that people think that putting games on Game Pass hurts game sales and hurts the industry as a whole by being a subscription service instead of purchasing the games from you, the maker of the game, and the people that deal with it. What's your opinion on that?
I think it's very tricky. I think it's done terrible things to the music business when there's only streaming, and hasn't been good for movies that there's only streaming. So I think it's dangerous when it becomes the only way people consume this stuff. Mm-hmm. Because what will basically happen is, you make it so that it's the only way you can sell a game, and then they start lowballing you. Is usually the way it happens. And so basically everyone's a subsistence farmer at that point. But I think luckily we have enough platforms, and there's enough ways to market that we're in a better space than music was.
Yeah.
But I think it's okay as part of the ecosystem, and I think it's very dangerous as the only thing.
Yeah.
For sure.
Honestly, I hadn't thought about it until you just said it. Then it's literally a monopoly on delivery, essentially.
Yep.
If you're only given one way of doing things,
Yeah, and suddenly then your percentage gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Going back to, I don't want to keep harking back to Stadia, but it is a story part of your history. Does it, in your opinion, affect things with the concept of cloud gaming being that you can play the same game on any device rather than purchasing separate versions of it to play on a particular device? So were you not kind of nervous? You were like, is this going to cannibalize PC sales if people can play it on their phones or consoles, whatnot?
Yeah, well, I mean, for us, with that, one of the exciting things about the Stadia deal was that we'd be in house. So then we were paid regardless, and they were never going to pay us a royalty on it. So it was a safe bet. I think Microsoft is showing you the strategy. If you don't have the dominant device, and they perceive that PlayStation won, and now they won when they installed social, and so basically now their audience is never going to leave. So they have to go multi-platform if they're going to produce content, and I think you're going to see more and more of that if you don't have the dominant platform. So I think, you don't want to be in just one place. You want to be in as many as possible. So if someone on that phone can pay for it and someone on the console can pay for it, on the PC can pay for it, it's better. You know what I mean? And
I guess my final question before we wrap it up, is Revenge going to eventually be on Switch or Switch 2?
Nintendo's notorious. Like all these companies, when they get excited about their new thing, they don't like talking to people. They get a little bit of hubris. You know what I mean? And so they were very excited. And Nintendo's never really liked third party. I think they see it as a Nintendo delivery service. And then other people just sort of occasionally appear next to them, which is fine. That's what I buy their system for mostly. So they were having meetings with us because we were on the first Switch with Journey, and we were like, when's Switch 2 coming out? Yeah, give us dev kits. And they would be like, there's no Switch 2. And you're like, all right, I've got yeah, exactly. And you're like, well, my office mate has a dev kit, so like he didn't invent it, but they were very Japanese and very buttoned up, and they wouldn't do it. So we haven't started. We got our Switch 2 dev kits last week, which was exciting. So we're looking at it, and then we're into it. And I'm a big Nintendo. Nintendo hits my nostalgia buttons way too hard, and it's very bad. Even though they're not cuter or cuddlier than the others, they're just a big company. But they still managed to get me to buy the same game 55 times. So
Very briefly, what do you think about the price hike in games from for like the Switch 2 or even Xbox just now announcing that they're going to up game prices? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's not great because it's a lot of money. But then I went out the other day and I bought 3 hamburgers and fries for the kids and myself, and it was $120, right? So I think it's that everything's becoming more expensive, and we'd be fools to not go along with it because games have become we used to spend teams of 20 people making games, then 50, then 80, now hundreds and hundreds, especially like a Ubisoft or whatever. The cost of making games has gone up like 1,000%, but the cost of selling them hasn't. But there's also a breaking point where it's just not a good price. And so I think it's tough, but I think also the market these days we can change the price. Like we set our price right on all these platforms. In the old days, there was one price because that was what Walmart wanted, and I had to fly out to Destination PlayStation and convince a bunch of people in pencil ties, that they should stock the shelves and how many they should do. And if you didn't get Walmart to carry it and other people to carry it, then you were dead before you launched. And at least now you can persist on an online platform, and we can move the price around. So I think that part's healthier. But it's a bit of sticker shock. In Canada, that's Mario Kart World is $110.
Yeah.
$110, which is. But then again, I paid $150 for Conker's Bad Fur Day in Australia in like '98.
Yelza.
So
Australia prices
that was
crazy.
Yeah, I flipped a lot of hamburgers at Hungry Jack's to get that going.
Yeah, I feel like AAA games have been quite the same price for a very long time, so I feel like it's kind of been an inevitability that it would go up eventually. But that is the nice part about AA and indie and games like your own game and others out there, that they can just choose to make their game $10, $20, $30, $40, $50, or whatever it is that they want to make it, and look at their own margins and whatever fits. And I think more people are going to start gravitating in that direction, I guess, since AAA is going to start going up. Honestly, that's been a lot of where the innovation is anyway. So lately,
and I think that's it. And then it just gets weird when it crosses with Game Pass, and you've got like an Indiana Jones for free versus, like a 2D jump and run
Right.
for free. It's very strange. Like the whole that I don't think the
Right,
market is shaken out. Yeah, I don't think this is its final form.
Yeah.
Alex, humor me on this question. So I remember thinking for the longest time that we were just getting screwed by developers, and they were just marking the prices because they just were tired of not getting the returns they wanted, and this and that. And to some degree, that may be true. The DLC is probably less value than it has been in a long time, things like that. But I noticed when I was doing a lot of retro reviews and things like that the little thing at the end of the shareware episodes would pop up, and they'd tell you how much the game would cost, like a Doom and a Wolfenstein. And it was like $50-$60 back then in 90s, 92 money. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, games cost that much? And that was just the extra parts of the game that you already played?
It was like that in the 80s as well.
Easily compared to development costs that have only probably tripled, quadrupled, and we've been sitting here paying this 50 to 60 increase for like 2 decades, and we're sitting here like, I can't believe this. It's like maybe that's the promise we've been given.
Yeah, I think it's always it's just like value for money. So it's I mean, it's true. It's always been expensive. It's always been an expensive hobby, and then that's why that led to a lot of piracy in different periods, and it's led to a lot of the shareware model, and then the free to play model, and then all these ways to play. So I think there's more ways than ever to play, which is nice. And I think it's not going back down again at this point, at least on initial release.
Yeah, I think GTA 6 will be the first $100 game where that's the standard price.
It sounds like, not to think of it like politics, it sounds like they're testing the water for that.
Yes.
There's a few stories going around just to see how things are reacting. But, hopefully not, but maybe.
Yeah, we'll see.
What do you do, not play it?
Yeah.
I played
maybe people will just buy less games.
Yeah, the only GTA game I ever played was GTA 1 back when it first came out when I was a teenager.
Oh, yeah.
I've never played any of the other games because they don't really interest me. But, wow, yeah, that is an absolute juggernaut of a title. That to say that would be a system seller is an understatement. People will be buying consoles just to get that game. Yeah.
Yeah, proper system seller.
It's Rockstar, baby.
Old school system seller.
Yes. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the Quad Damage podcast. Joining us today, of course, was our special guest, Alex Hutchinson, and the new game, Revenge of the Savage Planet. Did I just say it right, or did I mumble my words? Yeah, it comes out next week. Yeah, it comes out
on every console node of man.
Exactly. So, if you haven't already wish listed this, or if it's already out by the time you watch this, make sure you plop down that cash, okay, because we need a third game, basically. So, Alex, where can everyone find you and Raccoon?
If you're on Twitter, I'm on Bang Bang Click, actually on Blue Sky as well. If you want to come hassle me, I'll probably answer your questions. And yes, game's out May 8th next week, Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. Please grab a friend, buy 2 copies, and play it.
Excellent. Deadforge, what about yourself? Where can our viewers find you?
Of course, you can find me on X at Lord of the RPG still, Deadforge on Patreon, Deadforge on YouTube, and that's pretty much it.
Medium?
You can find me at YouTube and Patreon at Midnight Medium, also on X or Twitter at A Midnight Medium.
And as for the podcast itself, you can find the Quad Dam podcast on Twitter and on Blue Sky, although I am rethinking whether we should be on Blue Sky, on Reddit as well at the Quad Damage Podcast. And if you want to speak with me and just throw some shit my way, it's RobertYapp80 on Twitter, on X.com. Yeah. And until next time, gentlemen, keep on booming.
Keep on.